to be part of this review process of Africa youth policies, which is something very thought-provoking in itself. I look forward to learning from fellow experts on the panel, Tshepo, Ebenezar, and indeed all the young people present here. I look forward to a very interactive and engaging forum where we are able to learn from one another and across regions. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Willice, for sharing. Welcome, it's good to have you on. I think we'll go with Tshepo. Please correct me if I'm pronouncing your name right.
Yeah, it's a unique, well, it's a very common name in South Africa. It means hope. It's Tshepo. I am Tshepo Makhanye. I'm from South Africa, Johannesburg, and I currently manage a learning and development team in Harambee Youth Employment Accelerator. So what we do is we accelerate young people, unemployed young people, into entry-level jobs. And this topic today, I think it's at the heart of what we do, and I hope to make a meaningful contribution from our learnings and ensure that we can probably leverage from each other and make a huge difference in this pandemic of unemployment in Africa. So yeah, thank you so much, Catherine.
All right, thank you for sharing that with us. Ebenezar, over to you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. My name is Ebenezar Wikina. People call me Eben for short. I'm based in Nigeria. I'm from River State here in Nigeria. I'm the founder of Policy Shapers. We're a civic tech organization that's trying to mainstream young people in public policy here in Nigeria. We're most famous for Reform IELTS campaign, where we're trying to build a policy advocacy movement across Anglophone Africa. So far, we've engaged over 74,000 people, and we're trying to, make a change that will save the continent close to $50 million. I'm a policy nerd, so this is like my habitat. Talking policy, talking public policy. So I'm looking forward to discussing and learning a lot from Willice and Tshepo and all of the people here who share their thoughts around how to better make youth policies work for young people on the continent. Yeah, so thanks for having me.
All right, thank you so much. We have learned persons in the room doing amazing things. So this is going to be kind of an engaging one. I'm looking forward to it. So let's get started. I mean, we've all heard it before. We've all heard people say it. I feel like every time I read an article about Africa's youth, I always see it. Oh, Africa is blessed. So we have a youthful boom. We have this. We have that. Everyone is so quick to talk about our large population of young persons. And somehow it seems that everyone thinks that automatically translates into some sort of growth or some sort of hope, or the fact that we're automatically, going to have, automatically means that we're going to have young persons contributing to, sustainable development or socioeconomic growth. But somehow we keep forgetting that there's a need for us to invest in these young persons. And, apart from just investing in these young persons, we have to create safe, enabling environment for them. And this means that policies have to be strong. Apart from just writing the policies and coming together to create these beautiful policies, we have to come together to implement them and make sure that the strategic thrust or the different pillars that we've outlined or the needs that we've put up that exist for young people are also being catered for. So I think it's very important that we're having this conversation. So I took some time to screen through different youth policies across, South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, just to really understand the sense of what we're trying to achieve really across Africa. And I don't think that the problem is that we don't know what exactly it is that we need. But I think it's just very interesting, the different approaches that these policies have taken. But I will share my views here. We're here to hear from the speakers. So, as we go on, we're going to, talk deeply about the different parts of the policies. So we're going to be talking about employment and employability, in South Africa. We're going to be talking about access to education and quality education in West Africa. We're also going to be doing deep dive into active citizenship and meaningful youth participation for East Africa. So I'd ask our guests, I would say, we'll assign different things that we know. We want to share with us, how these things resonate with us. What do we think is the current state? What are the strengths and weaknesses that we see exist? And even in putting together the policies, what key actors can we see? And what's missing? I think I'll start from South Africa, and that's on employability and employment and employability with Tshepo. What do you think?
Yeah, Catherine, I think from my end is I had to look at the approach here, and we've got to be data driven when we deal with policies, and stats are important. And we just finished the first quarter of the year, and recent stats has come out, and I had spent the past week just going through them, and which I'd like to share in this space so that we understand the magnitude of the problem, so that we can then, when we get to solutions or opportunities, we can then quantify them. So from my perspective is that, I mean, if you look at South Africa, we are a population of 61 million people, and unemployment is actually sitting at 34.5%. That is high. And when we also look at, zoom in a little bit and looking at youth unemployment, where we talk about 15-year-olds to, because that's what the youth policy regards as youth, is anyone from 15 to 34 years of age. And when we then zoom in, we realize that it's 64% of those young people are unemployed. And now that will now draw to the needs of youth policy as countries. And these are now more sitting at a stage where we now need to look at those and more closely, so that we are able to then say, how do we focus on these young people? Because these are the backbone of our future. If 62% of them are unemployed currently, then there's a big problem. What I also wanted to just also at the back of our minds before I get into the whole discussion is, in the last quarter results, we actually realized that the formal economy only was able to produce only 408,000 jobs at the backdrop of 2 million unemployed youth. So we can see that the formal economy is not going to be able to close that gap, and there is a huge gap that we are realizing. So I think from my end is, with the background of those stats, it's important that when we closely look at the youth policy, especially with employment and employability, we need to be then focusing on what are the barriers of young people getting into employment, and what are the barriers of young people being employable, or what are the employers saying are the issues why they are not hiring young people. So fortunate enough, when we get into those type of discussions, the strength of the policy is that it forces employers to be able to look at young people favorably, and it's beautifully written, I must say. The only thing that we need to be thinking about is the application of it, where what does business say, what does employers say, what does labor say, and how do they interpret that? Because it's easier for labor to recycle people who are already in employment than spend time in recruitment, training, and development of young people who are unemployed. And therefore that talks to the employability of young people. And lastly, on this part from my end is, we've got a company this side called McKinsey. McKinsey did a study, or does a study every year for employers, where they look at how many jobs will the formal sector create realistically each year. And that tells us that they are, I mean, right now with an unemployment of 2 million young people, well, we're saying like 6 million young people, they can only create, formal sector will only be able to create about 1.2 million jobs. So it means 5 million young people are not going to be employed this year. So I think it's important then to then say, what else can be done? And that's why we are in this discussion. So yeah, I think that's where I would like to start, Catherine, with some stats to then say, let's look at the problem right now realistically. And then when we delve into this issue, we are then able to have that background in our minds to then say, how best can we interpret these policies and translate them, and sometimes even help our government to interpret these policies and the reality on the ground. What is the reality on the ground? Yeah, I hope I've answered.
Yes, you have. Yes, really well. And you made some very relevant points. And I think I really like the first thing that you said. For making policies, we have to be making sure that we're using evidence-based approach. Young persons are not a homogeneous group, really. They are different young people with different realities, different barriers, different access issues, that has to do with age, that has to do with educational background. So different things affect young persons, which is why it's important. I really like the fact that South Africa's youth policy sort of, help the work around positive youth development. They're very, very particular about the environment, the different, the different factors, that sort of affect young persons, especially, for employment and that transition from, high school or tertiary institution into formal employment. As somehow it seems that more of our young persons, like Tshepo said earlier, in informal employment, since it's only a small, a small bit of, it's 1.2%, I think he shared, that in the end transitions to formal employment. So that means there needs to be another look, at how to get young persons, to make sure that their skills are, they're ready to, go on and, become entrepreneurs. They're ready to go on and, make sure that these skills that they're learning from school means something. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really, really like the point that you stood on. I think I'll go over to Willice now, just to hear from Willice. In the areas of active citizenship and meaningful participation, how do you think the youth policy in Kenya, East Africa, is faring on that front?
Thank you so much, Catherine. It is great to share our experiences and perspectives from Kenya and the wider East Africa. The question of public participation and civic engagement of young people is that of a collective responsibility. And to quote one of my idols, Wangari Maathai, the late, who said that every one of us can make a contribution. And quite often, we are looking for the big things and forget that wherever we are, we can make a contribution. Sometimes I ask myself, I may be planting a tree here, but just imagine what's happening if there's a billion of people out there doing the same thing. Just imagine the power of what we can do together. And that is, I think, how we view the role of young people as active citizens. We think that already we see people get involved in their local communities to reinvigorate democracy in various ways. We also see at the Youth Cafe active, particularly youth civic citizenship, as being multifaceted. In some respects, it could be small in scale, as well as all the continuum in between and to bigger issue campaigns and advocacy. But the underlying framework that underpins the civic engagement as we see it is that of the ability of young people to restore democratic values and instill in themselves skills such that they are not only able to participate, but the society can benefit from their quality participation and the unique insights and perspectives that they bring, not just as young people, but as active members of the community. Therefore, I think that the key question of active and meaningful participation of citizens in public affairs is a distinguishing feature in emerging democracies such as Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and many emerging democracies in East Africa, and indeed the entire region. And these are judged, I think, by the extent to which the governments are open to citizen involvement. Kenya, for instance, has a public participation law, so that the community and the society in its entirety, their participation is enshrined in constitutional provisions. This, of course, has its fair of challenges because it is not oftentimes that they are taken up, and the spaces can also be disabused due to power imbalances between the young generation and the older generation. But nonetheless, we see that the role of duty bearers would be to give citizens a space with which to hold them accountable. It is because of this that citizens, young people in Kenya, in East Africa, and in Africa in general, continue increasingly, as we see, to demand for increased roles in their agency and what we call the youthful obesity. This is the only way in which we can tap the demographic dividend, if you wish. In East Africa, the numbers are varied. In Uganda, for example, the median age of, I think it has the lowest median age of young people. In Kenya, we are at 19. That is the average median age. In Tanzania, 70. So we share a lot of similarities in terms of the demographics. And therefore, our lived experiences in terms of youth involvement in decision-making is of paramount importance. So the space created cannot be, the importance cannot be gainsaid, especially when we are reflecting on the scale of particular decisions and their implications, because oftentimes the decisions being made today have a far-reaching effects and implication for the future of the world, and with young people having their entire lives ahead of them. So where decisions concern the urgent need, for example, in improvement of basic service delivery in a community, youth need to take part in these processes and take advantages of opportunities and spaces that exist, such that they are heard, as all the community would benefit from their perspectives. But it is not only coming as for young people simply because they are youth. I think it is also a rights issue. It is a right in for example, most countries, including Kenya, for citizens to access information with which they can meaningfully participate, or with which they can question authority and get the information that can enable their active agency and citizenship. We also see drawbacks such that even though in paper in Kenya, for example, the laws are very are very good, for example, in terms of Access to Information Act. But if you contrast that with what is actually happening, is that it becomes still hard to access information that can enable young citizens make informed decisions and be able to meaningfully participate. It is therefore, I think, the duty of service providers, there's the demand side and the supply side, service providers being the duty bearers to scale and increase mechanisms through which information can freely flow, and also taking advantage of the advances in technology and digital tools. But historically, the young people vary between adults and young people among different parts of the society. In Kenya alone, there are lots of cultures, lots of different regions, and these inform the foundation at early stages of how later on in life young people can be able to influence decisions that affect them. But we see civic engagement as increasingly being recognized as a very integral component of youth development, such that the nexus between civic engagement and positive youth development, the evidence tells us that there's a huge interconnection if the two are linked together. Such that one does not happen without the other. But for various reasons, for us, we can directly resonate with this. We've seen the potential of it to build human and social capital, to take advantage of both human and social capital that is important for growth of our communities. But the civic engagement, as we see it, also cannot happen in isolation. There's need to educate youth and young people on their rights, which is something that is often overlooked, because you cannot participate without an awareness framework or a clear education mechanism that allows you to then effectively contribute in the society around you. So these skill sets that are important in terms of nurturing democracy and participation are really needed now more than other times, particularly with the advances in sophisticated technologies that can easily distort what civic engagement itself is, even such that people do not even agree on its basic meaning. But having said that, we've also seen inspiring examples. Young people have led.
We will get into this policies a little bit more in the next segment. I'd just like us to just touch very briefly on this, just so we can have some time to have discussion and ask questions. So I'll just ask that you wrap up very quickly, if you can, please. Thank you.
Okay, Catherine, I know we will be having a breakout room. Just to conclude our view on civic engagement and the youth participation, particularly looking at its strengths and weaknesses. I think on the balance of the equation, it is getting stronger. It is replete with a lot of challenges, particularly with the shrinking of civic spaces in some of the spaces we work in clampdown by authorities, and this calls for young people ability to come together and be vigilant, such that we protect the spaces and claim our roles as active citizens in a way that can help influence key decisions that affect our lives. Thank you, and I look forward to learning from the other speakers and other regions as well.
All right, thank you so much for sharing that. That was really extensive. I think one thing I'll take away from that is that active participation really, and it's a collective responsibility. Young persons have to come together and realize that if you don't have knowledge of the systems that you wish to change, you cannot change them. I think one thing that we do well in Africa is forget history. We don't look into the history of movements, how things have happened, how we have moved things from just words and thoughts and bite-sized actions into actual change. So I think that it will be good for young persons to really realize that, if you want to see the change, you have to be a part of the system. You have to get involved. Thank you for sharing that. I'll move over to you, Ebenezar. Coming to West Africa now. Share with us, what do you think about access to education, access to quality education in this part? The strengths, weaknesses, the current state right now. What do you think needs to be done?
Yeah, so to make it a bit easier, I sort of narrowed down to 3 countries. I chose Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal. Senegal because that's in the Francophone countries. Look at it first holistically and the state of young people across these countries. And then I also narrowed down, deep down into the education sector and try to x-ray what work is being done in those sectors. So the first thing I found is, so the 3 countries, Nigeria's youth policy, Nigeria's current youth policy is from 2019 to 2023. That's supposed to elapse next year. The previous youth policy was 2009, and it only got reviewed in 2019. Ghana's current youth policy was scrapped in 2010, but there's no specified range as to when it was supposed to elapse or when there will be an update to the policy. And then for Senegal, they have a policy from 2012 to 2017. And again, there's still no word around if there's an update and when that update will happen. So we see a sort of trend across the Western African region, especially when it comes to youth policies. But I also checked for Mali and also for Sierra Leone. So most of the time, sorry, it's raining here, so just in case. So most of the time, what happens is youth policies are done, but sometimes they get forgotten, right? And so that's why you see a long gap between when the policy is made and when there's meant to be a review, right? Literacy rate, just quickly, literacy rates across the 3 countries for young people aged 15 to 24. Nigeria's literacy rates for this age range is 75.03%. Ghana is 79%. Senegal is 78.05%. Another interesting indicator that I found across the 3 of them is that on the Youth Development Index, so the Commonwealth has this Youth Development Index where they put together all of the youth industries like health, education, employment, and try to marry it together and then rank countries based on how they're performing. Nigeria sadly ranks 161 out of 181 countries as of 2020. Ghana ranks 131 out of 181 countries. And Senegal ranks 133 out of 181 countries. So it shows you that there's still a lot of work to be done, especially when it comes to youth development around that Western African region. For out-of-school children, now related to education, the World Bank says Nigeria's out-of-school children, this is still debatable. There's still a lot of conversation around it. Some people say it's 18 million, some people say it's 12 million, but the World Bank says it's 10.5 million. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done around reporting, especially for people who are doing some work, CSOs who are doing some work within that space. Because I know that a huge dent would have happened to this particular number, but I just feel that there's a huge reporting gap around there. But Nigeria's, case is huge because that's a huge problem that definitely needs to be addressed. Ghana has 265,000 around that out-of-school children, and Senegal has 630,000 out-of-school children. Again, another important thing is in the youth definition. I know Tshepo mentioned that in South Africa, I think the policy defines youth as 15 to 34. Nigeria defines youth as 15 to 29 in our current policy. And there's been a lot of arguments and conversation around what that means, and the rationale behind that. But we see a similar trend in Ghana and Senegal where youth age is defined as 15 to 34. and Senegal 15 to 35. And then finally, on the median age, so the median age pretty much tells you how young the continent. I mean, Africa as a whole is a very young continent, right? Nigeria's median age, one of the youngest countries in the world, is 18.1 years. Ghana's median age is 21.5 years. Senegal's median age is 18.5 years. We compare that to the world's median age, which is 30 years, and Africa's general median age, which is 19.7 years. It just makes you see that education is a big deal because you have a huge, a hugely young population. The population is very young. And I mean, I'm sure Tshepo and Willice would agree that for any kind of advancement to happen in civic participation or civic engagement, or for anything to happen really in the employment space, education really is the foundation where all of that framework is built on, right? And when we go into discussing the key strategies for in the respective policies, you would see that there's still a lot of work when it comes to ensuring that there's so much technical and vocational education, supporting that, and also ensuring that there's transparency in the processes when it comes to implementing these respective youth policies. So I just thought to give that quick overview of the policies in the region. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Ebenezar, for sharing the current status with us. I think that makes me just think quite a bit more. I mean, the foundation of this demographic dividends that we're hoping to use in a couple of years is education. And somehow, even in Ghana, where we have sort of high primary school, elementary school enrollment rate, so when it comes to tertiary institutions, there's still that low enrollment rate. And finally, when it comes to transition from school to work, it's still really, really low, like Tshepo had shared earlier. And you start to wonder, what's the problem with Africa? Is it access to education, access to quality education? Because I mean, there are two things there. There's, education, come to school and, cram 30 things and, let it pass through you. They are two very different things. What really is the problem? And I think one thing I noticed across, all the policies I read, one thing that stood out for me is we're talking about young persons, children, access to education, employment, so many access issues. And somehow, in many of the youth policies, we don't have stats on persons with disabilities. Children living with disabilities, that's a different ballgame entirely. In certain policies, they say the number, they're not sure yet. Some say 7.7% in, I think for South Africa, they said 7.7%, but it was too debatable. And there's this problem that Ebenezar read, the stats, most of these stats that we're sharing, they're not very current. I mean, you see a lot of 2012 and 2019 and 2016, and it just seems like CSOs and schools and the Ministry of Education now, it feels like we're running on 20% thing because we don't have all the information. How can we provide for these young persons, these out of school children? How can we provide for young persons if we really do not know the realities, or if we're not considering a portion of young persons? Where is the inclusion here? I think it's something to really think about, and as we go on into a deeper dive now. So I think, what exactly do we think are the opportunities that exist for us across these different things? What do we need to start to do differently? I mean, one of them we've already started to highlight, the statistics. If for example, a youth organization wants to go into Kenya, for example, and say, okay, our work is to improve learning outcomes, they don't even have the stats for that. Who do they go to meet? In the creation of these youth policies, I'm not sure if we went through, the acknowledgement. So, I couldn't see a lot of young persons being contacted. It seemed like it was mostly certain ministries or certain people. Not a lot of young persons were mentioned. And I just start to wonder if we're creating policies for the youth and somehow the youth are not involved, what are we really doing? What opportunity areas do we think exist, across these different things? I think I'll start with Ebenezar now.
Yes, please. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, there's a huge opportunity for, just like I mentioned, for education development across the Western African region. I think across Africa generally, right? So I took some time to read through the policies for Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal, and to look at the strategy that they had in mind for developing education and making the sector a lot more viable and ensuring that there are less school dropouts and everything. And I just picked maybe like six key points for each of them. I'll run through them quickly. One of the ones I think that is paramount for Nigeria, and this is also in the 2019 to 2023 youth policy, is curricular review. I mean, there's so much. I mean, if you've been in the education space for a long time, you must be hearing curricular review for a very, very long time, right? I don't know why it's still there, because it seems like we just keep talking about it without doing much about it. But I think that this is actually, yes, I mean, I actually think this is something that really does need, a whole lot of work. And, youth-led organizations that work around these issues in Nigeria need to really push on this. This was also in Ghana too. So Ghanaia's youth policy of 2010 also said that they do plan to review the training and education curriculum, but not just for people who are learning, but also for teachers as well. I did some Google search. I couldn't really track as much progress as related to this particular thing, but I think this is something as well that needs to definitely be looked at. There's also a lot of talk around increasing the quantity and quality of learning facilities. Now, in Nigeria's tertiary education space, we have a huge deficit, right? I'll give you a good example. So the US has 330 million people, around that, so 350 million people, and has about 5,000 tertiary institutions. Nigeria has about 200 million people, around that, and we have about 107 something tertiary institutions. So every year there's a huge, competition, for people wanting to go into the universities, right? So you have people who are able to secure university admission, whether it's university or polytechnic. You have people who often have to wait for long between secondary school and university. But when I checked Senegal, it was like a reverse case, because in Senegal, people finish their secondary education, but don't have incentives to continue to tertiary education. So what Senegal is trying to do is that they're trying to see how they can support and encourage people to enroll in higher institutions, because you have people who prefer to do vocational work, right? They prefer to do the TVET centers and quickly be done with their 2-year program versus going into like a full-blown tertiary education program. And I think that's one of the things that they're trying to work on. So something again interesting, it was good you mentioned, Catherine, it was good you mentioned PWDs, because in the Nigerian policy, there's a plan, there's a strategy to leave out 5% of all university admissions to young people living with disabilities. Now, good idea, but I don't know how that has been done. I mean, some of the things are just beautifully written, but you don't see how they are implemented, right? I mean, I tried to track it as well. Did some search. I sent a couple of emails to the Ministry of Education. I really couldn't get any information before this particular session. But I think, again, this is something that I didn't see in Ghana and Senegal, but if it is being done in Nigeria, I mean, that would be a good start. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's a good start to see how we can ensure inclusion in the education space. There's also, in the Nigerian youth policy, talk around increasing funding for open and distance learning. This is still a very, little tapped sector in Africa, because I mean, we have open education, open universities that are not really well funded, and I'm sure COVID must have shown us that, we really need to make our education sectors very, very flexible and able to adapt to changing circumstances. So this is something that also needs to be looked at. I didn't see it in Ghana, maybe because Ghana's youth policy was on in 2010, and maybe Nigeria's was on in 2019. Maybe that's why. But that was something that I think that needs to be looked at closely across. Finally, in Senegal, so Senegal also had quite a lot of, so in their plan of action for youth 2012 to 2017, they had quite a lot of information around support for local groups, so adult education in rural communities. That is still something that I think is still largely untapped across West Africa. I mean, in Nigeria, there was a practice at some point where adult education was being spread across various rural communities. But I'm not sure how much CSOs and governments have narrowed down on that. But Senegal seems to be doing a whole lot around ensuring that even people in rural communities have local education groups where they can meet from time to time. They have instructors, and then the Ministry of Education in the country works with them to support them. Again, sorry, another final. So again, around inclusion, besides just including PWDs, which I saw in Nigeria, but I didn't see in Ghana and Senegal. Something I saw in Senegal that I didn't see in Ghana and Nigeria is a direct conscious effort to ensure that there's higher enrollment for girls in schools. So there's a conscious, I mean, the Ministry of Women Affairs and Ministry of Youth, Civic Engagement and Employment, I think is what they're called in Senegal. They're all working together to see how they can consciously get more girls enrolled. I mean, I think there are issues around culture and all of that that pretty much limits female or girls enrollment to school. So within the primary, secondary school cadres, they're working to see how they can get more girls enrolled in schools. I think that's even though it doesn't seem like a big issue, but I think that should still be something that the youth ministries in Nigeria and Ghana should look at and CSOs, because I mean, when more girls are at school, we've always seen there are always stories and there's data to back it up. When you educate women, it trickles down to the entire community. I mean, she becomes a mother, raises her kids, raises the community, and stuff like that. So that's just some of the important key points that I saw from the three youth policies around education.
Thank you for sharing that, Ebenezar. That's very extensive. I like how you compared, the different policies and the opportunities that existed around all of them. I think one thing for me that also still stands out for me in West African education, and possibly across Africa, is the quality of the education. I once, had colleagues back in the public university I went to in Nigeria that used to say, "Oh, I did computer science, but we never got any laptop." In 2-3 years of doing computer science, and you can imagine what that's like. You're doing computer science, you're supposed to be working with computers, so there seems to be a divide, tech and digital skills, and we cannot allow that. I know when I was going through South Africa's policy, was mentioned the demands of the fourth industrial revolution. The fact that young persons now have to match, the skills that are required now, and because in the next 35 years, I think was a quarter, I'm not quite sure what the statistics were of this of jobs that currently exist will soon be automated. So just imagine, that many young persons leaving universities every other year, they're not ready for the world of work. That's also something to look at. The quality of education that we get, are they relevant to the times like you had shared earlier? That's really interesting. Okay, I'll move over to Tshepo. What opportunities do you think exist when it comes to employment and employability?
Sure, Catherine. I think also picking up from what Ebenezar is saying there is, it's when you look at especially the Southern African, what there is, the policies are not up to date. The last time they were done were just ages ago, and they don't talk to the current needs that are happening right now. I mean, I've looked at Angola, and I've looked at Lesotho and Mozambique. There's not much update there, which then also explains why we're sitting with the problems that we are sitting with right now. But now at the same time, those are good opportunities. I mean, it's a good problem to have, because we can now start mobilizing from the ground up and influence government and policymakers. So that is a good problem to have. And then also from what you've also said there, what I want to highlight is quite an interesting one with the persons with disabilities, is that in South Africa, and it's so funny that the what we call special schools for persons with disability, they don't go up to grade 12, they go up to grade 10. Just by virtue of that limits access of people living with disability into entry-level jobs, because currently any person who goes into, who gets looked at, or more, who gets whom we consider for entry-level jobs must have a minimum of a grade 12. So already people with disabilities are excluded because their high school education goes up to grade 10. So that is a big, big, big thing. And also when we look at the other excluding factor would be, of course, females. And even though I was actually surprised when, because generally in the olden days, we used to think that in South Africa, the population mismatch is 60-40, 60% male, 40% male and 60% females. Actually, that's not true. The latest stats actually say that it's 51-50, 51-49, sorry. 49% males and 51% females. So it's not that much. However, the females or the girl child is disadvantaged because of other responsibilities that they may have. So for example, if they have a sick mother, then they would be expected not to finish school or not to go to school or not to go to work to look after the sick parent. But the boy child will be encouraged to go to school and continue and complete schooling. And then also girl children are also susceptible to, of course, vulnerable to falling pregnant. So when they are pregnant, then they cannot go to school and complete or go to work, and they now need to stay at home and look after the children. So it's those barriers that do exist, unfortunately, still exist in 2022, and we've got to be looking at. To get into the opportunities that I think in the Southern Africa, in terms of employment and employability, where we need to be thinking differently, because we now know that the formal sector is not going to bring the jobs that we need. So we need to be thinking about growing the latent demand from opportunity from sectors like the digital sector and the global business outsourcing. I mean, global business outsourcing, where we bring foreign contact centers to set up in Africa and be able to, and be able to operate from where we are, because those sectors have proven that they employ quite a lot of young people. I mean, we've seen in the likes of now the BPO space is really liking Africa. I mean, they've just set up in Rwanda, and they've set up here in South Africa, and we're seeing those industries which were not popular before that are now taking up, and it's a new pathway for young people to actually grow into. And also the digital space, where, of course, our schooling system does not, expose our young people into digital literacy. So those are the kind of, that's where the opportunities from my end, where I think we need to be able to start exposing young people and closing those gaps. And therefore, that's where the opportunities lie, where digital skills and the economy, and also in the global space, in the BPO space, where the gaps are just small to close, where I think the biggest requirement would be English. I mean, I know that some of our countries have been colonized by different countries, for example, French and the English and the Portuguese and whatnot, but where we can start stimulating those latent sectors and allowing them to not go traditional, where we're thinking about factories and where we are thinking about mining. And I mean, those are good, we can stimulate those, but I think it's important that we can start stimulating other sectors of the economy and getting them. And the third one for me would be I know in different, in the region, in the different countries, they refer to it as small to medium businesses, but I think there's a term that we've looked at where we're thinking it's called hustling. Hustling means it's not a registered business, but it's Tshepo, someone who's able to cut hair, but does not need his business to be registered, but they're economically viable for them to be sustained and also gain customer relation skills, and they're able to gain that experience and make money and be able to sustain themselves. Or somebody who's able to do a car wash, or, like those, we call them hustling opportunities, because when we start saying it's small business, then it requires regulation and business and the red tape and startup capital and all of those become then barriers. But when we start pushing and making these side hustles sexy, to look sexy enough for young people, for them to be able to also take pride in them, to say, in the meantime, while I am waiting for my big break, or while I'm waiting for my, employment, let me be active in this. And it's also a cool thing for me to do while I wait. Let me fix computers, because maybe I have the ability to do that. Let me fix phones. Let me, like those small, possibly, but because right now they're not so sexy, and therefore there's no uptake in that. And the focus is getting formal employment. But we know for a fact that the economy is not growing at the fast rate, or at the rate that is good enough that will create enough jobs. I mean, like I think I shared earlier, where I said, in the last quarter alone, when we zoom in just right in the south of South Africa, where in the last quarter, 480,000 jobs were created in one quarter, but there is 4 million unemployed young people. For us to be able to absorb all those young people, we would need to create 5 times that number, which is impossible. So therefore, let's then deter the markets. Let's then say there are other opportunities. Like I've mentioned those 3 where I said it's the global outsourcing business, and also the digital space, and the hustling opportunities. There lies in some of these opportunities, and we can start stimulating that type of environment. And yeah, so those are my thoughts, where I'm thinking that we can actually start there. Catherine.
All right, thank you for sharing that. So I think one thing I agree with everyone. I'm sure what thinking is. I think the last point that you made was, one that really resonated with me. We need to start making the informal sector sexy. People need to be attracted to it, and I think that for me, it's the fact that when I was younger, in school, career day was doctors and lawyers and engineers, and no one brought the person that no one brought an entrepreneur, no one brought someone working in waste management, no one brought someone that was a hairstylist. It didn't give us a lot of things to aspire to. And apart from the fact that those ones were not necessarily advertised as the right kind of employment, there's still a mismatch. What you're being taught, as much as you can easily pick up hard skills. What happens to the soft skills, and make sure that you're not just a roadside barber, but a barber that has stores in different parts of the country, or even outside the country. You need to learn those skills, communication and professional skills, those business planning skills, those sort of things that you need to learn. It needs to be advertised in a different way. I think we already have some kind of view, okay, if I see, my past, the past alumni from my school, and I'm a hairdresser, I tend to hide. But if I'm a banker, I want to step forward and say, I have a job. But you both have jobs. You're both providing services. We need to make it sexy, like you said. Thank you for sharing that, Tshepo. Thank you. Over to you, Willice. What opportunity areas do you think exist for active citizenship and participation in government?
Thank you so much, Catherine. I think for us in East Africa, we see this fragmented policies. For instance, the East Africa community has a youth policy, which brings together member states with the goal of harnessing the youth potential to help forge the East Africa community integration agenda. With also still almost similar objectives related to planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluating youth programs. We see opportunities in more collaborative approach, and increased roles by, for example, what is done at the East Africa Community Secretariat level, and what befalls the national level government, since the community as an economic bloc is also supported by country contributions. But in specific countries, we also have different policies. In Kenya, for example, we have the youth development policy revised in the year 2019 as part of a commitment for a greater cohesive society where young people are part and parcel of economic and social revival, if you wish. We see other policies in the Kenya Youth Development Policy actually has very clear calls and action plans on how to effect civic participation and representation among young people. This is also complemented by the Kenyan Constitution itself, which sees public participation as a key in its delivery. So, in terms of the fragmentation of policies, we also see it at national level. For example, the Kenya National Youth Development Policy, for instance, is a national level blueprint for youth development. The country has 47 different other counties, and those counties, depending on who is the governor or the leader at that particular time, might have their own youth policies. Actually, quite a number of counties have county-specific youth policies, some of which entrench values such as patriotism and volunteerism. Coordination and having a more coordinated framework, I think, can help Kenya immensely. There is opportunity for cross-county youth exchanges, because there are certain counties that, a county like Nairobi is already far much advanced in terms of youth development. If you contrast that with a rural or a peri-urban county, then the circumstances might be very different for young people living in the same country. So such that it becomes hard to still claim that all youth are equal. Some youth might be equal more than the other. So these might go towards perpetuating inequality and entrenching marginalization, such that the raft of policies that we have do not, in a coherent way, address the lack among young people. So there is need, of course, a huge opportunity to strengthen youth participation in governance and as well as their leadership, the leadership roles thereof. In Uganda, we see, there is the civic engagement action plans, which is very innovative, designed to deepen civic citizen engagement with the scorecards results, and such that a pathway is created through which we can activate citizen demand for better services. The idea of a scorecard here is very innovative, and because oftentimes the policies do not have clear yardstick, like a marking scheme. How do you score that what a policy has achieved? With innovative tools such as petitions, integrated SMS messages, letters, and community meetings. So we see the development of citizen voices, as it were. We in Uganda still, there is the local government council scorecard initiative. So while in Uganda they have local governments, in Kenya they are county governments brought about by the new constitution. So this devolution, of course, key gaps is to what extent are community members, capacitated to be able to implement these scorecards at the local levels, and how does that look like? There's also the Youth Action Plan in Uganda, formulated by the Uganda National Youth Policy, which looks towards unlocking the potential of youth, particularly in sustainable wealth creation and general development of the country. In Tanzania, in order to advocate for public participation in decision making, the government introduced citizen participatory approaches, what they call the bottom up, to enhance community-based decision making in community development process. And one of the methodologies they use is public expenditure tracking system, which is very interesting because the inclusion of voices of citizens, particularly youth voices, in budget making is extremely important, because we can talk all we want, but if the recommendations coming from you are not budgeted for with a clear tracking mechanism to see, okay, you promised to allocate X amount of money in, let's say, job creation for youth. How do you track that, such that, because the other key issue linked to that is corruption and pilferages that are still bedeviled the country. So we have too the National Youth Development Policy in Uganda, very similar in framing with that of Kenya. Maybe the point of departure is its innovation in terms of also involving youth at international levels. There's always the key issue of how do we involve diaspora youth, the youth in diaspora back in the local community development. Because if you look at foreign direct remittances by citizens in diaspora, they far much outweigh any revenue generated locally through the commodities that drive most of the economies. And this actually speaks to Kenya as well. So an opportunity for harnessing the potential of young people working abroad and having clear mechanisms such that they can feed into the local development process is something that is a gap within existing policies, and we can do better. But other opportunities, I think, should be looking at the policies with a lens of long-termism, and not in order to circumvent the 4-year or 5-year electoral cycles, where in one administration you have progressive government with implementing youth policy, then you have another one and regresses on the gains made by the for political expediency and competition. So I think they need to have a more long-term framing of the policies. If even you look at the reviews of the policies, they follow electoral cycles. So I think we should be about the next generation, not only the next election, and that can help our policies work better. But lastly, opportunities for improvement revolve around participatory design of civic activities with young people themselves. They revolve around tracking of policies, extremely important at all levels, such that there's a clear monitoring framework and tracking mechanism for what is being done and what is not being done. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you so much. I really like the last thing that you said. It should be about the next generation, not about the next election. I think that we should remember that informing policies, there has to be continuity. We cannot just continue, like you said, we keep pushing agendas based on how we're feeling or how we want to be viewed, but also about the person that we're creating the policies for. Thank you. I think another thing for me that stood out for me is that for young persons, knowledge is power. You cannot hold your leaders accountable if you do not know how they're supposed to lead, or if you do not know the things that they have set out to do. So we have to track that. We have to track the promises, of course. We have to track the deliverables. We have to track where the money is going to. If they say they're going to spend $50,000, for example, on renovating a school, and the school is still there after 2 years, and you're not asking questions and you're not participating. Thank you for sharing that. I think now very quickly, I'll take one question from the audience if you have any. And just keep the conversation going before we talk about the very next thing. Just one question from the audience. Do we have any opportunity areas that have jumped at us from the conversation? Breakfast with themes? Is there something that we would like to share or ask one of our speakers? Just one person. Going to the list now to see if anyone that has a question. All right, I guess I'll just hold that for a few more seconds and then move to the other portion of the conversation. All right. Okay, it seems that, okay, I have someone's hand up. Okay, Aminu, please feel free to unmute your mic.
Yes, thank you very much for this wonderful conversation on the youth policy. I think our major challenge here is probably the implementation. How can we start driving the advocacy around the implementation of the the African youth policy, most especially of those policies to the various states that are African region? Because most times we have a beautiful policies, laws, but the most important thing is implement. As we speak, let me just briefly, just in a second, let me just briefly tell you people what we've done. My organization championed the call for a sustainable youth policy framework that should cater for young people in Kogi State. And by the special grace of God, we advocated for through the State House of Assembly. We passed through legislation, and as we speak, the governor of the state has sent it to Kogi Youth Development Commission. And the Kogi Development Commission is the advocacy that young people have carried to. The issue around capacity building of young people should not be left in the hands of development partners alone. And the state government need to commit part of the resources and budget for youth development. So my take on this is, how can young people start calling for, start advocating for the implementation of the youth policy? That is why we have unemployability and unemployment in the high increase because of lack of capacity. So how can we start driving that implementation plan? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Aminu. I'm not sure if I give that to Tshepo or Ebenezar, because it's quite related. So I guess the first person to unmute just go. Thank you. Does anyone have any?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the Nigerian case. And again, this might connect to what I wanted to say next about the failures that we see and the recommendations. One of the things that I noticed was that there was no clarity on how the policy will be resourced, right? I know that it's not possible for government to say, this amount of money is just for the youth policy, right? There's need for intercollaboration with the various ministries and agencies, but which agency would fund which activities, and at what time is one of the things that I think, was likely missing. So, I mean, Kogi State has a good opportunity to remedy that at the state level, just ensuring that, plug in the right activities for the right agencies and ministries, and getting their buy-in early enough in the process. Because I mean, every policy has to go through stakeholder engagements and consultations, right? So ensuring that from the get-go, they are involved in that process would be a good way, to ensure that that funding happens. And when, the budget is released and there are budget lines that speak directly to the policies, CSOs like Aminu, can lead advocacy for those issues, ensuring that the government, what's happening is 2 months in, 3 months in, we haven't seen any implementation on this particular issue. Just tracking those individual budget lines can be a good way to ensure there's sustained advocacy. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Ebenezar, for sharing that. That was very point on. I think that this brings us to the very next portion of the conversation, where we're touching on the different themes that each person is speaking about. So I'd like to give it a twist. I'll say for Ebenezar, for example, what gaps, what failures do you think exist in the active citizenship, youth participation in governance space? What gaps do you see? What failures do you see? And you can just give one solution that you think to solve that problem.
Okay, for active citizenship in Western Africa, right? Is that what you mean?
West to the east.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think Willice's point, and I said a couple of comments just saying that. I think Willice's point about Uganda having a scorecard was such a wonderful idea. I think that's something that is missing in a lot of youth policies, especially the one that I reviewed across the West African region. There's a lot of what, we'll do this, but there's no how, and there's a very little when, So, for example, the Nigerian youth policy the 5-year period should last by next year. I mean, there's supposed to have been a mid-review session. We're supposed to know how far we have come, what is left to be done, what activities on the action plan even need to have been implemented. Again, the action plan even needs to be published. So if you do a good, because I'm a Googler, right? And I know how to search for things online. If you do a good search, the best you will find is that you see the national youth policy across several websites, and also for the Ghanaian youth policy and the Senegalese youth policy. But you wouldn't find the action plan published online. And I think that's one of the takeaway points that we need to push. We need to ensure that these action plans, because this is the way you can hold them responsible. The action plan will tell you when this will be implemented, the M&E framework behind the entire policy, someone like his scorecard, as Willice mentioned, that is a very important thing to be listed. As for the gaps in the civic participation in the Western African region, I think that I think Nigeria and Ghana are trying, because the National Youth Service Corps, which is done after your tertiary education, is a way that the Nigerian government tries to engage young people in active citizenship, volunteering, their various communities they are posted to. Between 3,000 to 4,500 young people every year. I mean, that's a lot of people, right? And generally, more young people are getting engaged in civic participation. I mean, we saw issues like the NSAS in Nigeria. That is not too young to run. So young people are being a lot more vocal, especially as we run up to the 2023 elections. In Ghana, there's also something similar called the National Service System, I think is what it's called, where people are matched to jobs. So like a nurse could be taken to a rural community and a teacher is taken to a school somewhere. So they match them to jobs and then work with the private sector to help pay for the period. So it helps to address the unemployment issue and address the civic participation issue all at the same time. Senegal also has, in fact, Senegal's youth ministry is called Ministry of Youth, Civic Duty and Employment. So they pretty much cover the three issues, and it's very key for them. I mean, Senegal has had one of the most stable democracies in Africa. They haven't really had a successful coup, and I think that if you see campaigns like the Free Senegal, #Free Senegal, and other engagements that young people have been having over the past year or so, you agree that there's still some bit of engagement in that civic space. Senegal does something that they call the National Civic Service Volunteer Program, where I think between July 2021 and this year, they've been able to get 1,000 young people to volunteer in various parts of their communities, right? All of these are great initiatives, but again, I feel like everything comes down to funding, right? How are we able to scale beyond just having people in NYSC across the various communities? How are we able to match them and build their skills such that even when a person goes to school, for example, I feel like one of the reasons why I'm still struggling with math, is that sometime in JSS3, we had someone from the NYSC come to teach us math, and my math just disappeared. I just started struggling from there until I finished secondary school, right? And it wasn't the guy's fault, because I feel he doesn't have any experience in math, he hasn't taught math before, and he came in just struggling with all of us, and we just went through it. So even preparing people to volunteer is a good thing, ensuring that their skills are even built so that they're able to fully give and support and make sure that their impact is really, really given within the respective spaces. Yeah, and that's in addition to the scorecard. I think that scorecard idea is very forward. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that with me. That was really good. I think for me, what stood out, just like what you said earlier, is the community works program also in South Africa, where you have young persons, living in tertiary institutions, having that 1 year work experience where they get to learn those skills, which is really important, because there's school and then there's real life. There's work and coming to I think my first time in common employment, I was a bit thrown back. Also, I have to do all these things. I have to speak to people. I have to be accountable to this person. It was a curve for me. And I did NYSC before that, so I should have learned something, yes, but I did not learn that. I had to learn on the job. So imagine if someone could not pick up things as fast as I could. Just having that work experience period before you transition to full-time employment really works out fine. I'd like to hear from Willice also. Willice, what do you think are the failures that exist across employment or education, whichever framework of Tshepo talking about? And what solutions do you think need to come out of it? What solutions would you recommend?
I believe that for these policies that we are developing, there has to be a robust monitoring, evaluation, and even learning, actually, because we also have to learn lessons from what is working and what is not working in the policy, such that the designs can have a tracking mechanism. So we see the extent to which budget was allocated to a particular activity called out in a policy plan or document. The uptake, we can track with the uptake and develop matrices for tracking the progress and the lessons that are being learned, such that they are able to to influence better policies, that we can use a variety of tools and advocacy, but also coordinate or work together, because a research institution, a university can research on what is happening, what is the state of play. A youth organization can write a petition or question the progress. I think there is almost something for everyone. The private sector can be confronted with data on employment, because part of particularly economic related provisions are about lives and livelihoods. So these collective and harnessing the various synergies that can be able to ensure regular monitoring, annual trackings. Here we have proposed for the upcoming government to have annual roundtables with the reviews of what really the commitments they made to youth in the current election, which is due in a month or in 2 months. So such kind of and they have to be happening regularly, such that it is not an afterthought that comes after the 5th year. That is when we wake up and see what has been happening. No, I think there has to be, if there is a lot of lessons to be drawn from the private sector that can be utilized in the public spaces, such as quarterly reporting, even if it is not quarterly, but semi-annually or annually, since we are all here to ensure that our society function best for a majority of our youth, and the youth have a realistic chance of achieving their potential.
Thank you so much, Willice. From what you and Ebenezar said, I keep hearing the same thing. I keep hearing accountability. We need to see, what work was done before. We need to have an after-action review. So we made this policy for this number of years. What did we do? Who did we partner with? How much money was invested in this? What were the learnings from this? And this learning, based on, new realities also that have come up since then, and based on, recommendations from certain persons that are involved in the system, certain youth, it would be nice to have, that background as the foundation for the new policies. So it just seems like we're running on what's the word, full steam, just creating new policies over and over again, and not even paying attention to history. I'm not sure if a couple of us have noticed that in the policies that we read. They just mentioned, just a very small portion of, when the last one was done and how long it took them to review, but never really what has been done and what didn't work. That's something that we need to look forward to see. That's something I look forward to seeing, in future policies. Tshepo, how about you? Do you have any policy failures that you've identified across, education, across active citizenship, and youth participation that you like to highlight as certain solutions that you think would be a good fit?
Yeah, look, my colleagues here, they've just highlighted very important aspects, which I agree with fully. And I'd like to take a different angle and just backtrack a little bit, because sometimes we think that just because governments have put together policies, then they know how to implement. Sometimes they don't, and in most instances they don't know. So they've put. I mean, these are ideals, and it can be disputed to say, oh yeah, but just because they put it together and they throw money into it, therefore they should know. My experience has not been that in working with government and government departments. It has not been like that. It is just that they needed a little bit of hand-holding and also proving to them that maybe a lot of massaging egos, and just to try and steer them to a different direction, to the perspective that they have of how to solution the problem. And this also talks to what Ebenezar and Willice have said, that it takes collaboration. Unfortunately, as a single entity, government on their own, they can't do it. Private sector on their own, they can't do it. Civil society on their own, I mean, for us as not-for-profit organization, it requires and even funders out there. So it's a collaborative effort. Now, one of my solutions would be, it is important that as civil society, when we feel like, is to answer one of the questions that says, where do we start with implementation? And I'll get back to some of this, so I'd like to round it up as well to say, it's important that as organizations in a small community where we are, try and find these solutions where proof of concepts, where we can, in our small communities, in our small little corner, do these mini projects, these incubators, these programs where we can demonstrate that it should be done this way and it works when it's done this way, so that we are able then to influence decision makers. Remember, if a decision maker has not seen it work in their country, they will be resistant to it. They will not be receptive. But if in a small corner, in a little, like incubator type of a program where we can find a funder somewhere, a donor somewhere, where we are able to convince them to say, and we'll share these type of passions and interests that we've got, either in education or employment, or in or in active citizen participation in all of these. So we then do a proof of concept of some sort. It may take us a while, maybe a couple of months to a year, but it's easier when you have a proof of concept to try and convince other people to say it's possible. Unlike to say, oh yeah, but in the Philippines this is what they did. Oh, but in the US, well, it's very difficult. The answer that you always get is, we are in Africa, Baba. We've got to find an African
This is
solution.
Africa.
And I think it's important, it's imperative that we see how these small concepts work in Africa and test them out and then convince them. That I think from our end, that's when we are able to earn the trust of business so that they can feel that we can invest. And then we can now also win the interest of governments, where they can say, oh, actually, we can now start channel funding to this from the budgets, because they also hold the biggest purse that we need to be mindful of. They hold the biggest purses. So we can then start attracting those. So I think in all of what we are doing, and for us in this platform, because we have these similar issues and similar problems, we can start sharing in this type of, and then have more of these type of conversations where we are then saying the next one is, so Harambee, where do you find your funding? Willice, where do you find your funding? And then let's talk to all these funders and say, here's what we are trying to do in these different regions. And therefore, that's how we catalyze. And that's where, from my end, I'm saying, instead of working in silos, and I like what LEAP has done, where it put people from all over Africa in one platform where we are able to say, what are you doing and how are you doing it and where are you doing it from and who's funding all of that and who's involved and how are you influencing your government? Let's share best practice so that we are able to say, okay, let's try it in our space. Let's do this. Let's connect you to different people, because one of the biggest barriers in employment and employability, what we found was it's finance and finance. I'll tell you a quick story. In South Africa, it's actually funny in that an article that was released by Sunday Times says it costs at least 912 rands per month to look for employment in South Africa. This cost includes printing of CVs, going into internet cafes, getting into transport, to and from interviews, and all of that. It costs 900. And if you look at that, even government grants, they don't go up to that. A child grant is 450, and an age, a disability grant is 1,800. Unemployment grant is 350. So generally, that would mean that most young people in South Africa are locked out of the economy, and they will not be able to access and then be able to look for employment. And then the second barrier that we've looked at is networks. It's imperative. I mean, networking is a reality in our society. If you don't have a backing of an Ebenezar somewhere, you're not going to get a foot in the door. So if I start mentioning people's names, that works to say, look, I work with this organization, or this person referred me. And I think that's when we need to start tightening those type of relationships. And that's where we can start to mobilize and start to get the attention of the right people, so that these people can be able to then start investing and start unlocking their resources. And we are then able to start solutioning the solutions that we are having somehow in our little corners. And more than that, start to scale up. Scaling is a bigger problem, and it's what we need, because the problem is much bigger than what we think. It's much bigger than government. Government on their own, they can't do it. They know that. Hence, that's why we need to make them aware that partnering and networking, this is how they can benefit, and it will be a good story for them to tell. And business, we then say, if you invest in these type of, because remember these, and these policies and these type of activities that we are doing, some people think, some businesses think that it's philanthropical, which we just need to throw money and it's from the goodness of our heart. Actually, it can be a business. They can make profits. We just need to make them feel that this is a bankable initiative, and then they will respond accordingly. And that's when we stimulate people to then say, actually, you can make a guaranteed profit in this. And that's where, from my end, I'm saying, let's stop making them feel like they need to donate. They need to, it's good, donations are great, get me right, but they go up to so far. Donations go up to so far, but investments have a different feel and different attraction, and it ignites certain things from different, it unlocks certain different streams of income. And then that will be able to give us money to do this, and also expertise from other people. And this will start attracting the right people, because we've got some people that are sitting in different amazing jobs, but these are the skills that we need in these type of forums, where we are able to say, we need your expertise, we need your skills, but we don't have them because we don't have access to them, because they would rather sit in corporate somewhere and make good guaranteed incomes, whereas we could actually start drawing from those type of people. So I think that's my take over and above what Willice and Ebenezar had said. So I think I didn't want to repeat what they've just said. It's just a different take and an angle from my end, where to say, let's think of leading, let's manage from the bottom, where we then assume that they are not aware or they may not know best. So we can then teach people and all the stakeholders that are involved to then say, actually think about this differently, and therefore we can then start stimulating this and fighting the same cause.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think what stood out for me was really, to stop working in silos. We work with young persons. I know Youth Africa works with young persons. I know that Youth Cafe works with young persons, and other persons on this call work with young persons. I just imagine, we've learned over the years, what makes young persons tick, the opportunity areas, the gaps that exist. Are we sharing the learning from our programs with the government and saying, okay, this is how to look at it, like you said? I think that's something that we're all going to take home and think about. I think that's a very, very important point. I think I'll stop on this note and allow us to go into the breakout rooms and just, discuss across the themes and come back just to share, certain questions, that we asked, certain solutions that came out from it. So I'd ask that the team, puts us in the breakout room. All right, so everyone has been assigned to different breakout rooms. We'll be engaging with our speakers. So please join or back in about 10 minutes just to share what we've discussed. All right, please click on your breakout room, you've been assigned. And we have our speakers in there to speak with you. If you're experiencing any issues with joining your breakout room, please let us know. All right, so I see a few of us still haven't joined the breakout rooms. If you're on the call, please let us know if you have problems with joining the breakout room. I will assign you. Let's get in there and have conversation with our speakers across the teams. We're going to be talking about employment, education, active citizenship, and youth participation. So get in on the action and share your views and ask those questions. Also, if you're experiencing any issues with joining the room, please let us know. All right, thank you. All right, thank you. Hi, Pete. Everyone has been assigned. So just click on the one that you are assigned to. Okay, I see you now assign you to room 2 now. All right, please, you've been assigned. Please join and join the conversation in the room. Hello everyone, if you're still unassigned and you're not in a breakout room, please go to the breakout room icon on the Zoom platform and join the room you've been assigned to. And we have our speakers in there ready to have conversations with you. So you do not want to miss out on this. All right, thank you. All right, everyone, welcome back. I see we have about half the number that went in the room. Just to give a minute more for other people to join us before we start to share, reflections from the breakout rooms that we had. It'd be nice to hear from the 3 breakout rooms just to get a sense of what was discussed very quickly. I'll ask that each person, someone from the team shares a reflection for about 2 minutes each, just so we manage time. What were we able to speak about and what solutions came out of the room? It would be good to hear.
Yeah, so from my own breakout session, Chidima was speaking about that. So Chidima, that's the first breakout room.
All right.
Hello.
Please feel free to unmute, right? All right. Hello.
Hello. Okay. I'm Chidima. I am in the US. And I think what Ebenezar wanted me to speak on is the question that we posed in the room was how the young people in the diaspora can support, the youth empowerment back home, basically in Africa. And one of the ways that Ebenezar actually emphasized was just sharing skills, and which is actually something I'd never thought of, and I guess I've seen it around, but didn't really think of that as a real way for us to help empower young people back home, is to basically just figure out a way to share the skills that we're learning out here also with young people out there. And another thought that comes to me is the sharing of resources. I know a lot of times we think of resources as money, and that's honestly not off the table, but I think also figuring out a way to utilize that money to make a bigger impact. And one of the thoughts that I'm having, so I was saying that I recently started working with Carrie's Black Projects, which is a newer organization that's looking to empower young people by providing digital skills training to young people in parts of Africa. So funding would be, organizations like that are looking to do good, possibly creating some type of crowdfunding and reaching out to young people that are in the diaspora for us to help fund those types of efforts. That's one of the thoughts that I'm thinking. So the 2 things, just to wrap up, is sharing of our skills and sharing of resources, which includes funding.
All right, thank you so much, Lima, for sharing. I really like that skill sharing and sharing resources. And I like that we emphasize that resources do not only mean money. I think as Africa, once we hear resources, we're thinking, okay, how can you make funding? Yes, but the resources mean so much more than that. That's a good one to hear. Is there anyone else from the second room that would like to share some reflections and certain things that they came up with? So who would like to go from Willice's room? Is there a volunteer?
In our group, we had we discussed the question on how we can promote youth civic engagement and their public participation, and we were joined by colleagues. I can speak briefly and donate some of the time to the group members to add in, but some of the key solutions and key questions that came up was reiterating what Tshepo said at the outset of data-driven and evidence-based approaches. So how that even civic engagement has to be grounded in data, and particularly accurate and very local level data that is collected locally, interpreted to ensure that we know who is engaged and who is not engaged. The other issue that came up is, even though civic engagement is a local function, but also linking it with the global conversation. So almost what people would say, acting locally and also thinking globally. We had great suggestions on ways in which we can involve marginalized groups of youth, such as rural youth. And one of our colleagues gave an example of, for example, this Zoom meeting, which would not ordinarily be accessible to a rural youth. So increasing broadband access to rural community, but also utilizing local community dialogues such that the engagement is really local driven and coming up. The aspect, and I really like the idea of mobilizing youth and also electing youth, young people exercising their democratic right to vote, and also voting for young people such that when they get into those positions, then they can act on behalf of youth. Let me give other participants who are there, like Adebayor and others, opportunity to also add in.
All right, Chris Aluta once again. I think Willice, from what I heard, I mean, you've captured everything. If I just want to use 30 seconds to repeat what I said earlier on, with regards to one of the presentations that talked about the challenge in Africa with regards to data, accurate data. And I said that for now, we also need to make sure whatever we're doing in our local community, the data we are gathering is almost accurate. So by the time we're expanding our web, so whatever I'm doing in my community here in Abuja, by the time I connect with someone that is doing something in Lagos, someone that is doing something in Kenya, with regards to this particular issue, we know that the data is almost accurate because we are a team connecting an accurate data that a member of us collected in Abuja, another member collected in Lagos, another connected in Kenya that relates to this particular issue. We can beat our chest and say to a large extent, this data is accurate. So the challenge is also on us to ensure that while we're waiting for the big picture where we now have systems and structures that you can like the Mackenzies of this world and co, you can bank on, while we are here, let's use what we have to ensure that what is coming out from us now is accurate. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Adebayo. That was really important. I think I'll wrap up very quickly with Tshepo's group. Does anyone have anything else to share based on the reflections from that group? Very quickly. I see Chris. Chris, are you trying to share? All right, so I'm not sure if Chris is trying to share that in. Is anyone trying to share their reflections from the last group on employment and employability?
Peace. I know Peace shared quite a lot. Can you maybe just share your thoughts, Peace?
All right, thank you. Peace, very quickly, please. Want to hear from you.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so in our group, we're discussing about employability, that data is a driving force. So if we could share data like what Mr. T shared in South Africa, how they use data to drive opportunity for young people, that we can actually adopt that and also use it in other countries to see. So that data is one vital thing. Then secondly, skills, which I think Chidinma also talked about, skills sharing. So those are the things we really emphasize on our group. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And I like that data is, coming out from all the groups. We want to do things based on, we want to do things that are data-driven and evidence-based. Or want to make sure that we're collecting the right data, even at our local levels, before it becomes something that is global. All right, thank you so much, everyone. I think I'll open up the floor right now for questions. I'll take 3 very quick questions. Emphasis are very quick. Well, our time is fast spent. Just if you have anything that you'd like to ask our speakers, Okay, I see Peace. Peace, so we have 3 people. Peace, while the others signify, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you once again, Catherine. So my question is, I'm very sorry I joined late, due to network issue from where I was. So my question is there any template, an existing template of the African youth, excuse me. I'm sorry, please. So is there any existing template of the African youth, is it policy or constitution that need to be reviewed? And how do we, cascade it down here to different countries, maybe states, and see how to engage stakeholders like both government and private sector to see about, because I met where T was talking about data, how they use data to drive opportunity for young people and the amount of money young people have been wasting looking for job. So if we can also drive that, because like an organization, we are ready to undergo on for a research to also use that data, to engage government and private sector in our own states to see how it will come out. Because when you have data, like you said, tangible data, resourceful data, stakeholder will listen to you. So is there any existing template on ground one can use? That's my question. Thank you.
Looks like Kashan's internet is. Okay, can you guys hear me? Oh, okay. So it's not just me.
All right, thank you, Pete.
Well,
any of our speakers like to take a crack at that, just very quickly.
yeah,
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah, so I was just saying, I don't know of any templates that exist, but I'm sure during the Positive Youth Development Program, which Leap Africa has been organizing, which this is one of the sessions, right? I'm sure quite a lot must have been shared as to how the Positive Youth Development Framework can be used for most of the work that I'm doing in the various sectors, right? But I think one of the good places to start, and that was one of the things that I think Luther said, was ensuring that we share learnings. He says even if the work you're doing is in Lagos, like Nigeria, there's nothing wrong with sharing that with someone who's Nairobi, Kenya, for example, and making sure that everyone sees what we're all doing. So I think that's a good place to start. And then I think just going through the course content, if you're part of the program for the PYD program, you'll see how using the Positive Youth Development Framework can be used not just in the policy space, but even in your programming, the thought that goes into how you design your interventions. Just having all of that at the background would really be helpful. But I'm not sure if Tshepo and Willice have any templates to share. just so I'm not speaking on behalf of all of them.
Yeah, look, from my end, look, we can always share what we've done, and then you can maybe look at that template. So I think as soon as at the end of when we do the review, we can I'll put it down and note it, and I'll just share it with Catherine and Ahmed, and they'll be able then to distribute. Whoever wants to use, they can use or look at it and see if it works and doesn't work for them.
All right, thank you so much, Ebenezar, for that. I'm not sure I have any more questions in the chat. I'll see at this point, if you have any questions, just share with the lead team, Ahmed and Adebola, either via the WhatsApp group or via email, and then we'll get answers for you from our speakers. All right, we've come to the end of our session. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Special thank you, of course, to our guest, Willice. Thank you so much for taking the time out to share your view with us. Thank you, Ebenezar. Thank you, Tshepo, for contributing and for being present, and just for working really hard to make sure that young persons, are benefiting from. Hello, so my network is my bandwidth is unstable, so I'm not sure if you can hear me. It's frozen on my end. Please let me know. Okay, thank you. So I was saying thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you, Willice. Thank you, Ebenezar. Thank you, Tshepo, so much for joining and just for sharing your thoughts with us and your insights. I've taken a lot from this session. Exactly, with time well spent. I think for me, there's certain things I want us to remember even as we go ahead with the work that we do. I think it was Willice that said at some point, he said, rather than focusing on the next lecture, let's focus on the next generation. That was really, really, really good for me. I think Tshepo mentioned also, the informal sexual effective while we're not working towards that. Let's be able to tell young persons. You don't have to be a doctor, a lawyer, a professor, or something that has to do with you being in a suit. You could get your hands dirty and still make impact and still be, a positive addition to society. And thank you so much, Ebenezar, for sharing stats with us. I love that you came from an angle of reading and researching different policies and how it affects us, and just reminding us that positively development is not a one-size-fits-all approach. For young persons, there's so many things that affect them, so many barriers, so many biases, so many things that we need to work together for. And just to wrap up on T's notes, I see that Pete called you Mr. T, so I'm going to call you Mr. T also. For us to really get young persons, in the room, for us to get young persons to reach their full potential, we need to work together. That means civil society, that means government, that means individuals, that means policy actors like Ebenezar in the room. That means we need to all come together and make sure that we're really creating this environment. We're contributing to youth agency and making sure that young persons, across our different parts of Africa reach their full potential. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And we hope that you've learned a lot from us today. Thank you. Bye from this end. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Great.
Yeah, everyone. Thanks.